Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to Getting In, a college coach conversation. I don't know how many of you are listening live, but it's New Year's Eve, so Happy New Year to everyone. I wore a sparkly sweater, which I don't know if you can totally tell, and I still have my Christmas decorations up. And of course, the secret to all of this is that I am actually taping this on December 15th. It hasn't been Christmas yet, it hasn't been New Year's Eve yet, but suffice to say that I will be celebrating with all of you on those days and on this evening when this airs. All right, we are going to be talking a little bit later today about New Year's resolutions. We talked about New Year's resolutions as they pertain to finances last week. This week, we're talking about college admissions. So we have some suggestions for you all. We're also going to be hearing two stories from our team this year. We have two members of the team who started as traditional college students, but ultimately finished in very non-traditional ways. And one of our team members is going to share her story of how she paid for it. But before we get to her, we're going to start today with my colleague, Michelle Clifton, who's going to tell us a little bit more about her journey and what it was like to complete her education as more of an adult, non-traditional student. Hi, Michelle.
Hi, Beth. Thanks for having me.
Absolutely. And just as some background for our listeners and those of you who are watching the video, Michelle is a former financial aid officer at both Babson College and RISD here in Providence. Well, not here, I'm not in Providence, but not very far away. All right, well, Michelle, let's jump into your story. What was your journey and how did you kind of get to the point of going from a traditional student to a non-traditional student?
Absolutely. So, all in all, I enrolled in 4 different colleges and had technically four different majors. So it may have sounded like I was a mess. I promise you I wasn't. I just, life just took me on a few different paths, and sometimes that's how it works.
Yeah, absolutely.
So, so I'll try to keep it brief, but I'll kind of give my story of how it happened. So in high school, I didn't know what I wanted to do. And I remember there was a few different things I was thinking of, but by senior year, I was kind of comparing early childhood education or psychology or photography, a little random, but
Okay.
I ended, and I honestly didn't want to go to college right away, but I kind of just did because that's what everyone else was doing.
Sure.
So I ended up enrolling at White Pines College, which I guarantee probably no one knows where that is or what that is, but it was a teeny tiny art school. I think there was 100 students in
That's
Chester,
teeny
New
tiny.
Hampshire. Yeah, so
Okay.
tiny. And it was in Chester, New Hampshire, which was actually not too far from where I lived and grew up. So I enrolled there and I commuted there. I, for some reason, I just didn't want to go away to school at that time. So I not sure what I was thinking about going to an art school because I am not
Photography.
creative, but I do like photography. If it was digital at that time, maybe I would have stuck with it, but it wasn't for me. So I was only there for 1 semester, and I was working part-time while I was enrolled full-time, but I just liked working more.
Got it.
But while I was there, it was worthwhile because I took an anatomy class, that was required, and I loved it. And in the past, I had thought about going into nursing, but I didn't think I was someone who could handle it. So I took a break. I'll never forget the day that I told my mom I was not going back to school. I heard the whole, you're never going to go back, you're never going to finish, spiel.
Right.
And but I did. I took a semester off. I worked full time, and then I went back the next fall. I went to Rivier College in Nashua, New Hampshire, but I went part time evenings for nursing.
Got it.
So I stuck with that for a couple years. It was hard to juggle the two, but and I wasn't super motivated with school, but I was doing it. And while I was working full time, I found out about a nursing home that offered free training to become a nursing assistant, which I thought would be a really good experience to see if nursing was really something that I wanted to do. So I ended up becoming a nursing assistant, working full time while still in school part time. So right when I was about to dive into my nursing clinicals, I kind of had a panic moment where I was just like, I'd almost always worked full time. I would have to drop to very part time in order to fit clinicals in. I was living at home, so that sounds so silly to say, but I did have a car payment. I felt like I needed to be making money.
Mm-hmm.
And at that same time, my sister had she had gone away to school. So she had made the leap, and she went to Rhode Island, Providence. She went to Johnson & Wales in Providence, Rhode Island. And I went to visit her one weekend, and I just loved it. And I was so inspired by her, guts to move and to actually leave the nest, like I had not done yet. And I ended up finding an apartment nearby her, and I moved out. So I was taking a break from school, living on my own for the first time, working as a nursing assistant, making nothing, and realized that I had to make more money to support myself. So I had to find a second job. So funny, I don't even know how it happened, but I found a part-time job in the student accounts office at RISD, which really changed my life because it really showed me how much I love working in higher ed. So I was working in the mornings there, second shift at the nursing home, and I just didn't want to leave when I had to, my shift was over at RISD. I just wanted to stay there and work in the office. I loved the environment. I loved my colleagues. I loved helping students. And so I ended up getting a full-time job there in the loan office pretty quickly, and went part-time.
So you kept the nursing piece.
I did. I kept that for a little
Wow.
while. So when all this happened, I ended up getting married, and my life definitely changed. And as things settled down, I was like, well, I have to go back to school, but I didn't know what I wanted to do. I mean, I wasn't sure if I wanted to be a nurse or if I wanted to pursue higher ed more. So I was toying with going back for nursing or getting a business degree to hopefully, move forward in higher ed. So I ended up taking a couple nursing classes at CCRI, which is the community college system in Rhode Island. And I will have to say, it obviously didn't affect what I'm doing today, but they were excellent courses, and it really gave me a huge appreciation for the community college system. And I'm so grateful that I took that semester to do that. So from there, we ended up wanting to move, and I was applying to jobs all over and ended up getting my job at Babson in the student accounts office. And so we moved to Massachusetts. And from there, that's when I finally stopped working in the nursing home and decided that I wanted to stay with higher ed. So from there, I started out in student accounts, but at Babson, it's student financial services. So it's financial aid and student accounts combined. So from day one, I realized, I want to be on this financial aid side. I want to help people get through this faster than I am.
Right.
So that was my goal. But I knew that, in order to be a counselor and beyond, I needed to finish my degree. So from there, I finally, went back and I enrolled at Northeastern through their College of Professional Studies. So I, kept my full-time job, of course, and enrolled there part-time. And then took a couple years, but I finally finished my bachelor's in management in 2011.
Got it. Well, congratulations on that. And you were able to say to your mother, see,
Yes.
all was not lost. Your mom shouldn't have been worried, because it's pretty clear to me that you are a hard worker regardless, right? So at least she should have taken.
That was a problem, though. I always, threw myself into my work no matter what I was doing.
Right.
And I wasn't always focused on education.
Well, right. Or focused as much maybe as you could have been on, gee, do I really like these things that I'm doing? And then, you sort of, it sounds like anyway, it would dawn on you that, wow, I really like this. But the moment that you want to go from part-time to full-time at RISD is the moment where I would imagine that's when the light bulb goes off, and it kind of does, but you still keep the nursing
But I
job,
still was like,
so.
what am I doing with my life? Yeah.
But I think what's great to me about this story is that as a parent, I do think sometimes you're like, if your child doesn't go directly to school, or if they try it and it's not for them, then the fear is they'll never get their degree, and maybe I will have this child in my home for my whole life, or I worry that their opportunities will be less because they don't have the degree. And the fact is, and we talk about it a lot, there are a lot of alternatives in life to getting your college degree, and a lot of different jobs you can get. And in point of fact, you got some interesting jobs without your bachelor's degree. But there did come a point, for you anyway, where to do what you really loved doing, you did have to have that bachelor's degree. But you got it too. So I like that part of the story. I'm curious if there was one school in particular whose format and pace worked best for you.
Yeah, absolutely. It was Northeastern for sure, because through the College of Professional Studies, they're very fast paced. So when I was there, it was 6 week sessions for, 2 sessions in a 12-week term. So I was able to do 2 6 week sessions, 2 courses within a 6 week session, getting, 4 courses done in a quarter. So I felt like I was making progress, where I remember back, when I was, you know, in my 20 in 16-week courses at Riviera, thinking I'm never going to finish this term. I'm never going to
Right.
make it. Where I always joke when I talk to adult learners and I say, for me, the short terms worked for me, because as soon as I was sick of the course, it was
It
over.
was done. Yeah,
So,
absolutely.
and there's something about, getting the final grade and having that motivation to keep going. Um, so it definitely worked best for me. And I was able to do it in um, the blended format, where I could do some online courses and some in-person courses through their Burlington campus that they had at the time.
Yeah, and that's great. And actually, random question, but your degree is from Northeastern. What does your diploma say? It says Northeastern,
Yeah,
correct?
which
Yeah.
is one of the reasons why I chose that, because, even though I did a lot of online, online was definitely looked upon differently at that time than it is today.
Right.
Um, but yeah, that was one of the reasons I chose their
Yeah.
program.
And I think what's great about that is you did it a non-traditional way, but you have a Northeastern diploma, just like someone who's going in starting out as a freshman right out of high school has a
Yep,
Northeastern diploma. So I
absolutely.
think that's interesting. You took a lot of credits before you ended up at Northeastern. Did a lot of them transfer? Or was some of that early stuff a little bit of wheel spinning for you?
Yeah, I think that's probably one of the reasons why I was struggling with quitting on. I'm not a quitter. First of all, is probably one of the reasons why
Hmm.
even though obviously I am a quitter if I left schools multiple times,
That's
but
not quitting, that's taking a different direction,
right. Thank you
making a
for making
different
it sound better.
decision. Yeah,
so,
exactly.
so that one of the reasons I, was hesitant to switch completely was that I thought, oh, this is a waste, I wasted so much time. But in fact, I actually got every single course that I took and completed was transferred at least as an elective. Which the reason I said I had technically four majors was that, so I had photography and then nursing. And then when I first started at Northeastern, I was planning to do, I think it was finance and accounting management. And once all my credits transferred, I realized I could finish a little bit quicker if I switched it to management. So I
Got
did
it.
that at the last minute to finish like 6 months early. But yeah, I couldn't believe it. Even the courses that I took, it was like almost 10 years earlier had transferred as electives.
Wow. If you could do it all over differently, and if you at the same time would be offering advice to a student who maybe was in your shoes, where you didn't really want to go to college, but it's what everyone was doing, what would you say to that person, including you back then?
Yeah, for a while I definitely looked back and wished I'd finished earlier, and thought about, was it right to go right away? And but now, I'm almost 40. I have had time to reflect, and it's so hard to say what I would have done differently, because each school gave me an experience that brought me to the next place,
Hmm.
and I'm grateful for all of it. Um, but I will say, I know Michelle Richardson's going to talk about the funding piece, but the one thing that stands out as something I would have done differently is that I would have pursued tuition reimbursement more,
Mm.
because at Babson, when I first went back to Northeastern, they weren't offering tuition assistance outside of Babson for that 1 year. But then at some point they reinstated it, and I don't know when that happened.
Hmm.
And I didn't find out about it till my last semester. So my last semester, I got
Yikes.
funded by tuition assistance, and makes me cringe to think about, like, was it 2 years before? Was it like, I don't even know.
Right.
But I didn't look into it. And then I think back, I know that in the medical field, there's so much tuition reimbursement there. Like, where
Right.
the nursing home that I worked at, did they offer it? I don't know. They probably did. So that's one thing that I always encourage, especially non-traditional students, to look into, because many employers will help you.
Yeah, and in fact, it's a really good point. And you mentioned talking to adult learners. There's another division of our company called EdAssist, and in some of the work that you do there, you are talking to non-traditional learners who work for
Yes.
companies who offer tuition assistance.
Yep.
And in the new year, we're actually going to be doing a segment on this podcast talking about companies out there where if you work for that company, you can actually go to college and earn your degree, and they will, because of arrangements they have, pay for all of it. Literally, you could go to college for free. While now you have to do it while you're working. There are, of course, some caveats, and we're going to talk about that a little bit more, as I mentioned in January. But so that's really good advice. And I think also really great to just say, hey, I'm happy with where I wound up, and how would I have gotten here if I hadn't taken all those twists and turns?
Exactly.
So, yeah. Michelle, thanks so much for sharing your story with us today. I
Thank
really
you for
appreciate it.
having me.
Absolutely. All right, we're going to take a very short break. And when we come back, we're going to be hearing from another member of our team who's going to talk more about how she paid for it all. So don't go away.